Hello, my name is Mendy Levertov.
And my name is Gilad Bogner, and this is the High Energy Judaism Podcast.
Where we try to teach Yiddishkeit, Judaism, in a very enjoyable, fundamental, kishka way. Join us as we take apart Judaism and the Torah, Kabbalah, and whatever else comes up. Let's get in.
All right, what do you got for
That was
us this
solid.
week? That was good.
This week, well, we have two things to discuss. We're recording this. We don't say when we record it, and we don't say when we post it, but it is in the svivut. It is in the general thing related to the 4th of July, which is a fantastic and spiritual holiday, obviously.
Yes.
A day that America celebrates the founding of this great nation.
Amazing. So how does that tie into Yiddishkeit?
So what's interesting is that Chabad and the Rebbe and the Chassidim, very, very patriotic, incredibly patriotic, to the point that the previous Rebbe pushed to get citizenship in 1949 to officially become an American citizen. And there's a whole video of this. I mean, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe paid to get photographers and to get a videographer to come and take a video of it. They changed the, I don't know if they changed the law or el law, but they had the previous Rebbe was very sick because he had been injured in Soviet prison and other stuff, so he wasn't able to travel. And so they brought instead of him going to the court came to him. The judges came to him. They swore him in 770 in his study on the second floor of 770. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is fascinating because the previous Rebbe's passing was about a little less than a year later. So It's very, very interesting. It was very, very, yeah. And this is America is a phenomenal host to the Jewish people. It's a host to everyone. And it's interesting. It's very interesting how, from a spiritual perspective, the whole thing of America is so radically different than every other country that ever existed. That I would call it a Medina shel Chesed. It is a country built on kindness. It is a country that is built on the idea of bringing people that are, giving your tired and huddled masses, inscribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty. And the idea that it was built on a foundational desire, unlike a lot of other countries, which basically grew up out of a logistical thing. Whether it was, a country that ended up. I mean, there's a very few countries that were actually built that were created from an ideological desire.
Agreed. I think that the U.S. and Israel are some of the first of its kind to be founded, to be founded with a new name, with a new idea as a democracy. I feel like someone's definitely going to fact check me, and please, if you do, text me. But
what about Armenia? Yeah,
Armenia. Armenia was founded as but the Armenian people.
No, Armenia. That was just a dig at the Turkish. Nowadays, the Turkish government is very sensitive to the whole Armenian thing.
Israel recently recognized
that was a dig back at them. Blah 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 blah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay, so the U.S. is founded it's by refugees for refugees. First of all,
yes. And I will point out some coincidences that are not. Well, keep going. You finish your thought first.
Meaning that it was by the people for the people is very much an ethos, not a situation. It's a lot of democratic countries or free countries these days kind of came around to be those, but weren't really founded as those. And I think the U.S. is probably pretty special in the sense that it was way ahead of its time. The ones that were later to join, like Israel, were about 150 years later.
Right. I think what's interesting is that we have a lot of, there were clearly the founding fathers were deists, which means they believed in a God. or theists. They believed in the idea of a God. Some were, then not necessarily were they all a very practicing religious practitioners, although a lot of the original people who came to America came here to be able to escape, to be able to practice their faith. What's interesting is I'll point out two coincidences, which are obviously not coincidences, because nothing is a coincidence. Coincidence number one is that America is founded in 1776. And it is obviously there's fomenting beforehand to get it to that point before they officially declare independence. Chabad was founded in 1773, 1774. Which means in English, in my opinion, it's not a coincidence, it's a coincidence that the philosophical underpinnings of Chabad are the core for the spiritual energy release that creates America. Now, you're going to ask me, what exactly are they? I'm still working on that full theory.
The answer is don't worry
about it. In other words,
it.
I think don't worry about it. No. I think part of it has to do with the idea of that there's agency. Chabad is very strong about it. It's very strange. I call it, it's my wording, no one else's wording. We're cynical mystics. Even though cynical is a negative terminology, so I don't like it so much. But we're cynical mystics, which means that we are mystical, but we're very rational. We double check and fact check. The way that I like to think of it is that I may have used this terminology already before, is that when you have a mystical or a paradoxical experience, you try to figure out, what is the limitation of rationale. In Chabad, we don't like the idea of seceding to the unknown, the edge of the cliff. We want to crawl to the edge of the cliff instead of saying, "Okay, there's the cliff. It's somewhere that way. I'm not going to jump." Don't go near there. The cliff's 50 feet in that direction. We don't really understand what happens beyond the edge of the cliff, so therefore you can just stop over here and set up a little water station, and we'll drink and we'll have a good time. And Chabad is no, you crawl. You walk, and then when you get nervous, you get down on your hands and knees, and eventually you get to the very edge of the cliff, and you put your fingers over the edge, and you feel, this is the edge of rationale. This is where it ends. Beyond that, there's always going to be the edge. There's always a point beyond that where we say, this is faith. This is the unexplainable. This is the beyond. Beyond rational. Of course, God is beyond rational. God is true spirituality is beyond rational. Things that should be there obviously have to be things that are beyond our understanding. We are our position is that you crawl to the edge of the cliff and you reach and you put your fingers and you just feel over that 90-degree hook. You go, okay, that's the edge. That's as far as we can go. And one time you do it and you're like, wait, the cliff has grown a little bit. We actually understand a little bit more. At least we can explain a little more. We've built a teeny bridge that reaches into the abyss just to drop, and now we understand something different.
That's a great analogy.
And I think that is it leads Chabad to be in this funny place where we very strongly believe in faith and faith in mysticism, and faith in a Rebbe, and faith in the divine process. But we also are well, you have to understand as much as you can, and you should be thinking about reasons and rational. And it's this weird in-between space. Very individualistic. It had an America that is translated to be very entrepreneurial in a strong sense. The Rebbe raised a generation of people who think that we can change the world, which is a great concept that not everyone feels. The instinct of a Chabad-raised young man or woman is to say, if there's a gap in the market, I should fill it. Which you even see from young Chabad people who are not necessarily identifying as Chabad today. They end up going out and saying, well, we're going to start this and this organization, or this and this platform, or this and this thing. Because, and I'm not going to endorse anyone specifically, but this idea of if there's a gap, I should fill it. I should fill this gap. Who are you? Even, by the way, this podcast is very similar, right? We don't know the first thing about podcasts. Yeah.
I also want to point out
we feel that
So I also want to point out, because for the people going for the people hearing you and the organization of Chabad and the previous Rebbe wanting to come to the USA, one might think like, oh, it's an opportunism kind of aspect, and that's not the case, because the Alter Rebbe, I think it was the first Rebbe you told me, when the French emancipation started, when the French Revolution started, in that situation, an ultra-Orthodox Jew living in Russia would be the fastest to endorse Napoleon, which the Rebbe did not, and even spied against Napoleon for the Tsar. So, like, for those at home who would be like, oh, this is opportunism, and the Rebbe coming to the United States was him trying to escape a different. That's not the case. He stayed in the harder situation, realizing that Napoleon's emancipation of religion in France was pretty much just a ruse, which it did turn out to be, and proving again what a truth seeker he was, and what a aside from what's over the edge of the ration, he was really doing his homework and trying to read between the lines before he was like, oh, this might be easier than what I'm dealing with right now. That's my spiel.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, and I think that this is this idea of entrepreneurial spirit, this idea of individualism that is within a community. It is not uniquely. I'll give you an example of this. It's always good to have examples. My grandfather said, and this is my father's father, who grew up in Chabad in Russia, and his father was Chabad, his grandfather was Chabad, and he was like against people singing and davening, singing in morning services. He was against people doing communal singing. Why? He's like, the guy in the front leading the service, his job is that as a community, we want to have some sort of a communal experience of, we say there's prayers that we say, and there's things that we say that are very, spiritual and whatever. But don't start a song, because I'm not up to where you are. We're 10, 15, 20, 30 individuals, each doing our own individuated prayer. You're leading a service because you're doing this for the community, but you're an individual on behalf of the community. Don't sing. Get to the repetition, do it, keep it short and sweet. We love your voice, short and sweet. But if you're going to sing, and I don't know, because everyone's praying at their own pace, you're praying at an individual experience. So I'm praying, and I'm, 25 pages behind, then that's my thing. And in general, I think that was a very, Chabad today, and not to say this has morphed in certain things. It has morphed. The Rebbe actually changed certain things in Chabad, bringing singing into davening more consistently and more as a communal thing. It's both the phenomenon of the Chabad houses, of like communities that are not as traditional growing up. Meaning it's a experience that's made for both traditional and non-traditional people that are exploring and wanting to become more closer. But also people started singing, that I would encourage that it could be part of the communal experience. So it became more, Chabad has kind of moved a little bit away from that rugged individualism, just like America has also become a little more collective.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to reemphasize, the whole point of Chabad is that you're a person on your own, and you're supposed to have this interesting duality of you're deeply, deeply intertwined with your community. You're deeply, deeply intertwined with your connection to a spiritual Rebbe. And at the same time, the Rebbe's charge to every single person is you must be praying and studying and earning your own chops. You have to learn Chassidus. Yeah. You have to learn. That's what all these books are behind me. They're all Chassidus. And you have to be learning your own Chassidus and understanding and thinking. You can't just rely that because the Rebbe is inspired and inspires me. Like some people, by the way, come to shul by us at YJP, and they have the same idea. The rabbi understands. I don't really say a thing about the Dvar Torah. I'm not really listening. And the main thing is, come as a community. If the rabbi is inspired, I'm inspired. As long as he has the high energy, we're good. Right? And that's one perspective and one way of living your Jewish life. And the other way is to say, no, I have to be fully inspired. I have to be fully keen. And Chabad really, really demands that. So it's interesting to see that America even though today it's a little more collective, America's whole thing is the individuality of it. And the individual, the ruggedness of its, every person can make a life for themselves, should make a life for themselves, and you shouldn't be relying on the community, you should not be relying on the government, and it's like almost this negative thing to look for that. Which is interesting, which is very interesting. Now, yeah.
I was gonna ask maybe it's not a provocative question because my intentions are good. And if you don't want to answer, just say I don't want to answer. That's not. Yeah. But if you don't want to answer, just tell me you don't want to answer. I have two. It's a two-parter. One, what do you think the previous Rebbe, who was the naturalized Rebbe, the one who came to the States, what do you think he would say about what's going on in the U.S. today and the shifts and extremism, or the rising extremism in politics in the U.S.? And what do you think the Rebbe, the last Rebbe, would have said about what's going on currently in New York City, where a lot of these values that you're talking about in the U.S. are actually being combated on a mayoral level?
So I can tell you two anecdotes with kind of the surrounding philosophy, and we'll see if that answers the question.
Okay.
Number one, Ronald Reagan, the great president of America, there was an attempted assassination on his life in 1982, I believe it was, and he was, or maybe it was 81, and it was outside of the hotel in Washington, and some guy tried to kill him. He ended up shooting a bunch of people. He hit Reagan. He hit a couple other officers as well. And as we say, Lepal, thank God Reagan survived. One of the officers was killed. And the Rebbe spoke about this fellow and speaking about the imperative of education and educational morality. And speaking about how this young man, we always think of, many times we look at crime and we say crime is related to poverty, crime is related to lack of opportunity, crime is related to kind of these negative places that create a criminal. And I would point out that this young man was a wealthy, upper middle class individual that basically had, in the Rebbe's argument, it could be also mental health challenges, but the argument that the Rebbe was making was that he was a young man who was never really told no. And he decided he didn't like the president, so he decided to take matters in his own hands and shoot him. Mm-hmm. And this was a within the theme of the Rebbe's general philosophy, which is that morality must be educated and must be taught. And if you don't, you're running the risk. There's a anecdote, not an anecdote, isn't like it's not documented. I don't remember where it's documented, that someone asked the Rebbe if a Holocaust could happen in America today, and he said that it could happen tomorrow. Because the key thing that would make sure a Holocaust doesn't happen is if there's a moral conversation about what is right and what is wrong, not just how to make more money and not just how to use your Bitcoin to scam the government, but rather it is to make the goal of being a human is to have, or the goal to be a person is to recognize that there's a divine eye that sees, an ear that hears, and that cares deeply about how you act as a person, if your morality, if you're being a moral person, if you're acting correctly, and the overarching theme of the Sheva Mitzvot of being a good person, good in the moral sense. And that's why the Rebbe pushed for many years. In the beginning, he pushed prayers in schools. Then he shifted it to be a moment of silence, this idea of having an ethical and moral start to your day. That kids in public school, it's a secular public school, but they should, in the morning, have a minute where they can sit and think about being a good and moral person. And the goal of that would be that they should ask their parents what to think, keeping the separation of church and state. That the parents should be able to give them information and instruction on how they could act and what they should think about in that moment. If they're atheists, then I've basically said if it's an atheist kid, they can think about being a good person. That's fine.
Yeah.
And if most people are spiritually inclined and religiously inclined, they'll tell their kids to think certain, what they believe in. So that is number one, which is to say that America today, when it drifts from its core value, is because we're not having a conversation about morality. We're talking about, or to put it differently, our morality is not being grounded in anything beyond our own subjective feelings of what is and what is not right.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, you end up with perverted morality, because then it's tyranny of the masses. It's tyranny of those who basically, if we all agree that you're wrong, then you're wrong.
Yeah.
Even if we're wrong. Right. So that's number one. Number two, second anecdote that I'm going to share is something that a local friend in Austin of mine loves the story. This is a story from Alan Dershowitz, who today is a somewhat controversial figure. It's funny how he became that. But Alan Dershowitz was a famous civil rights lawyer and very, very strong on the American scene. Extremely involved Democrat at the time. Like today, he's moved to the right, very, 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 very. I don't say far right. I don't know. Depends on who you ask. Some people love him, some people hate him, but I don't even know why, like how he ended up that way. But that's what it is. Alan Dershowitz wrote a letter to the Rebbe about Chabad honoring Jesse Helms, which at the time was a senator that was, we could argue, squarely or strongly in the Arab lobby in Washington. What I didn't realize as much until I looked into it more is that there had been, and you go back and you read stuff, and you're like, oh, you read this in articles, you read this in other things. There had been a strong Arab lobby. With the war on terrorism and the stuff that led up to that, it officially, for a long time, wasn't a thing. Lately, it's come back. Qatari money, other Saudi Arabia always had kind of this official presence in Washington, but there was an official Arab lobby that was involved in anti-Israel stuff, in other typical lobbying stuff. And there was a senator called Jesse Helms, and he was super involved in that. And he was basically a little bit anti-Israel, or very anti-Israel. And basically, Chabad honored him at a dinner. I believe it was the Chabad in Washington, D.C., American Friends of Chabad Lubavitch. American Friends of Lubavitch. And they honored him at a dinner. And Dershowitz freaked out, and he sent his letter to the Rebbe about basically how it's a terrible thing. And the Rebbe writes back a beautiful letter, which is actually printed in one of the English letters that I have books, where he tells him, like, sometimes you honor someone for what they did in the past, and sometimes you honor somebody for what they did in the future, what they're going to do in the future. Sometimes you honor somebody because you can recognize that what they think, especially in politics, what they think isn't what they think. They think what they think because they just never thought the other way, because they never were inspired to. Mm-hmm. And so. Turns out, Jesse Helms, I think almost immediately after this, maybe the next legislative session, suddenly becomes much closer to Israel and becomes a very strong friend of Israel. When I looked it up initially, you have to read through his Wikipedia page to see that there was a shift and see like his voting record shift, because he was looked at as a very pro-Israel senator later on. And you have to go back basically and parse through the actual, I don't say the voting record, but you have to parse through like what he was, his different shift in opinion, to be able to understand and to realize that he actually had a different path before. Mm. That's how pro-Israel he became.
Interesting.
So, and what is this? And Dershowitz, he spoke about this at the Chabad. You can look this up on YouTube. He spoke about the Chabad convention when he was honored, and he's as being a friend of Chabad, and he speaks about the story. And he says, I was wrong. I was 100% wrong, and you have to know this. So one of our local friends that is in Austin has this perspective when he supports politicians. He supports political politicians, and he supports those who are squarely on the side of Israel. And he also supports those, to a lesser extent, who are on the fence.
Who are not yet on the side of Israel.
Or not yet on the side of Israel, correct. And he does it based on this exact philosophy. He says, this is a philosophy I strongly believe in.
Beautiful.
because of this letter and the story, I shared it at the time. I forget which specific situation it was that he asked me what I think, and I shared the letter with him, and he was like, "Okay, this is an incredible philosophy, and it's so true." And that's been his guiding philosophy for the last 8 years, which is fascinating. So my point coming back to this is Mamdani and the whole thing. We don't know. People shift. People change. You're able to. There's a concept in Judaism. It's called kabdeo v'chashdeo, which means you can honor somebody and you can suspect them at the same time.
Yep.
So it's not ridiculous to say that we're going to do our best to work with whoever's in power right now. And I love how people are always like, this is the only way that we can ever have safety in America because this specific individual is a president, this specific individual is going to be a senator, et cetera, et cetera. We have no idea. We don't know what's better for the country. We don't know what's better for the Jews. Sometimes you think one way, it turns out the other way. Sometimes it's vice versa. We believe that Hashem controls the world and controls the way that Lev Melachim, the hearts of the nations. So it's not the end of the world when someone, obviously you're not supposed to just sit there and not try to get out the vote. But when someone gets voted in, you say, okay, we'll work with, and we'll see where it evolves to. And yeah, and so in other words, is America? Is it so far gone? I totally don't think so. I think a lot of patriots, even American first patriots, there's a very vocal fringe. It's anti-Semitic, very vocal fringe, very anti-Semitic. But I don't think that
in
is
the founding fathers.
That is. No. I'm saying here now, currently.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Because the
very
founding
vocal
fathers actually have a lot of
two.
quotes blessing the God of the Hebrews and the God of the Israelites. I think I've seen George Washington quotes. I've seen a few of them.
A lot of the founding fathers read Hebrew.
Interesting.
In the original language. No, they didn't just read translations or know a little bit. They were able to read. They were fluent-ish in reading Hebrew, and they were reading Talmud. They were reading Bible, Chumash. Some of them were reading Zohar. Fascinating.
I was thinking back to
someone gifted me.
I was thinking back to our last week's podcast, and we were talking about binding contracts and what makes a contract a contract or a netter, and that is literally. I didn't bring it up because I didn't think about it, but in Israel, I needed to use a contract that I had to try and sue for a return on something. And when I presented the contract, they said, this is not a binding contract. It doesn't have a what if not clause in it. And it's interesting that legal systems have adopted, like, It's not interesting. We know this, but like, it's so cool to see how like literally one for one, legal systems in most of the Western world have used the Bible as a reference sheet.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think it's interesting that a lot of the things there's these courses out there which we're not going to rehash all the ideas. If people want to, you can Google it a little bit, but certain fundamental ideas. I mean, the we believe a divinely ordained right of people to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Like there's America's founded on this a very faithful, faith-based thing, but a lot of the philosophies that we have, freedom of speech, as being an extension of the person's expression of as a Kabbalistic idea. Humans are able to talk, and humans are able to express their thoughts. I think the founding fathers based their idea of property rights on John Locke, who took it from the Bible, from the Chumash, who took it from the idea of the Jubilee, the Shemitah, reverting everything back to at the end of every 50 years. The idea of there's a whole bunch of different. I'm trying to think. The idea that on the money is in God we trust. Which is this idea that on the currency. But it's interesting that you can put that anywhere. You can put it on the flag. You can put it on the state seal. Where do they put it? They put it on the place that most people struggle to trust in God, which is the financials of life, where you're not sure and you're worried, and it's really that's the biggest one of the biggest sources of stress for the average person. And on the money is printed in God we trust. And yes, it was added later. I know it wasn't added initially, But still, it's very, very interesting. I wanted to say that there was the other coincidence that I didn't finish mentioning is the idea is that the Rebbe came to America himself, came to America in 1941 on July 4th, 1941. And it was also, not only was it July 4th, but it was also the year that Congress established July 4th as being the official day that we recognize America's independence. It's not,
Cool.
before that they hadn't created it as a national holiday yet. Is it a coincidence? Of course it's a coincidence. Things just happen by themselves. Who would have thought?
I don't know. Last week's Parsha was a lot about coincidences not being coincidences. I think
Correct.
we can lean into it.
Correct.
Very cool. That's very
it's
interesting. I didn't know.
These are very interesting things. Yeah, yeah. And if you want to go from a Kabbalistic perspective, a fully Kabbalistic perspective, the America represents the final frontier for spiritual expression. And I think in there's two aspects to this. Number one is the idea that America is physically in the bottom of the globe. If you look at the world as a globe and you look at what's up and down, is not the magnetic north and south poles. Rather, it is some arbitrary spot that's the top and everything else is below it. Then if you rotate the world and put Israel and Mount Sinai and the temple as being the top of the globe, it's the spiritual connection point to God. So going downwards from that, America is part of the lower half of the globe. And the idea that Jewish centrality, as we say in Hebrew, or say it's a Talmudic terminology, Rov Minyanu Binyan, most of the majority of the quantity and majority of the quality of the Jewish people is in America. And even Israel today, being what it is, still the majority of people, I would argue, are in America. Especially, even though Israel would probably get very cranky about this, I would say the majority of Binyan, the majority of the leadership of the world, of the Jewish world, is in America. And
Is in America. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know they have Rabbanot. I know they have the official chief rabbis of Israel. I know they're working on two different standards. Even today, I would argue that most of the greatest Torah scholars and most of the greatest halachic poskim are outside of Israel, and outside of Israel, most are in America. But I will say that America also represents the final frontier as far as, again, Chabad's perspective, which is that there's no having a spiritual life in a world, in a society that is very naturally spiritual, naturally superstitious, or naturally leaning towards the occult, is impressive. But it is more impressive when you have a spiritual life in a country that desires and is excited about rationale and kochivot miyadi, my heart, my strength is my own, and I can make a life for myself. And having people be deeply integrated in a spiritual and a Kabbalistic practice in that kind of a country is something which it represents the final frontier as far as not just the physical world, but also the human psyche. The psyche of the human. What is the last part of a human that is most resistant to just deep faith? It is obviously the mind, the cynical part of the cynical mysticism. So America represents the cynical, and you could argue that maybe there are parts of Europe today that are just as cynical as America, a little more atheistic. We could argue about that, but at least definitely, even the countries that are officially more atheistic and cynical for many, many years, they had an official state church, they had an official state religion, and they had an official, their kings that are mostly symbolic today, but they're all established through, they're established through church rituals and religious rituals. America, we swear the president in on a religious item of choice, but that is a way of binding the president to uphold his or her oath to the office. But there's no anointing, there's no handing over. We don't do it inside of a church, we don't do it inside of a synagogue. We have a religious item which is basically saying, whatever you hold to be the thing that will bind you to uphold your word on this and this thing, it could be a gold coin if that's what spiritually, metaphysically binds you towards it somehow.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting. And that's so America on a certain, it has this weird cynical mysticism. It has this weird paradox of, it's on the one hand, it is an incredibly secular country. And on the other hand, incredibly, God bless them. How do every president end half their speeches? God bless you, or God bless us, and God bless the United States of America.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Didn't think of it that way.
Politicians in America will invoke God faster than politicians in Israel. Lately, the last couple of years, since October 7th, there has been a strong leaning of both more religious politicians, and also even the in-between, the politicians who are not explicitly religious have leaned towards religion much, much more, because of the miracles that came in the wake of October 7th and everything that happened. Doesn't leave much of a choice to people, I would argue.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
You can be cynical, but it's very difficult to be cynical and non-believing in Israel today.
Agree. That I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
You know, I've been very vocal to you about the fact that I feel more called when I'm outside of Israel to invest in my spiritual Judaism. That being said, I think it's a double-edged sword where in Israel, I think that you can exist within Judaism on a frequency level. Walking inside Jerusalem, which is where I grew up, you feel it. You feel it. And especially when you move away from it and come back, you realize how much of it you were taking for granted. But I've given this example to people is when you're in Israel and you bump into a really sweet girl on the street and you ask her if she wants to have a cup of coffee, and then from that cup of coffee, a second, a third, and you're gonna have to work hard for it not to be Jewish. You know, it'll have to be a really weird situation. Whereas in the U.S., without that Jewish identity and investment in community and in yourself and in your appearance versus the community, chances are she's not Jewish. And if any part of, your next generation being Jewish is even a little bit important to you, right? You need to put in the work.
100%. 100%.
What's this week's Torah portion?
Yeah, it's interesting.
BTW.
What's this week's Torah portion? So now, by the way, so this week's Torah portion we're ending off with well, it's good. It's a segue because America and the journeys of the Jews. The name of the Torah portion is Mas'ei, which means the journeys. And essentially, it's a wrap-up. It's a very beautiful wrap-up of the journeys in the desert. The entire book, we've been working our way through the desert and reaching for the land of Israel. Book 5 of the Torah starts off in next week, and Book 5 starts off with Moshe telling the people as they're about to enter the land of Israel. He begins this long conversation, reminding them the tenets of our faith, reteaching a lot of the different laws with extra details that hadn't been mentioned before, in his own voice. Mm-hmm. And then he also makes a covenant with the Jewish people, multiple different types of layers to the covenant as you go through the thing. He repeats the Ten Commandments. He recites for the first time the Shema, and creates this text of faith, the Shema, the V'hayim Shema. It's all coming up later. Mm-hmm. And then it ends. Book 5 of Deuteronomy ends with Moshe blessing the tribes, the Jewish people, and passing away. And it closes out with his passing.
Okay.
This here, we're basically setting up the stage for that. So what we're doing, we're listing off the journeys of the Jewish people. 42 different steps, journeys along the way, and just list them off where they are. And what's interesting is the Medrash says, Rashi quotes from the Medrash, that it's basically just like a king or a parent. It's a king who has a child that takes him on a journey because he was sick. And on the way there, they basically go through the journey fairly straightforward and fairly quickly. And on the way back, the kid's been healed, and now the king is showing this child, do you remember where we came through here? And remember the nostalgia of this place, the nostalgia of that place. This is where we were sick, and this is where I saved you from the wolves, and this is where you were cold, and this is where I wrapped you in a blanket, and this is where I fed you. We had chicken soup here, and all that kind of stuff. So what Hashem is doing, what God is doing in this Torah portion, is this this is where I saved you from this, and this is where you rebelled against me there, and this is where you kicked me because you're upset, and this is where I had to do this to you. And as it goes through the journey, it's a recap. What's interesting is it also gives us a few more details here and there of stuff that we didn't really layering in parts that we didn't really know, especially primarily the desert wanderings. We didn't know where the Jews had been. If you remember back in Parashat Chukas, there was a jump cut where suddenly now Miriam passes away and Aaron passes away, and like suddenly there's like all these things going on. That happens like boom boom from one to the other. And here we go through the list of where they were. What's interesting, I think we mentioned this once before, is that they spent 19 years in one location, and they spent 19 years moving around different locations. So when they spent the 38 years wandering the desert, a lot of the wandering was actually just sitting in one place and studying Torah and doing Judaism, doing whatever it was. So that's essentially how we go through the entire first section of the Torah portion, and then it brings us to the edge of the desert, and then Hashem reminds Moses. God reminds Moses that they're going to enter the land of Israel. They're going to go into the land with a lottery. There's going to be a lottery. They're going to cut up different pieces and different tribes. They're going to do a lottery and match things up, which is wonderful. And then he gives us the borders of the land of Israel, which is very interesting. So it tells us exactly how big the land. I think we may have mentioned that Eilat is not part of Israel.
Correct.
And a big part of the Negev is not part of Israel. Jerusalem was towards the south of Israel. Beersheba is basically almost the southern point. I don't know exactly. Yeah. It's not on the southern border, but it's right before the southern border. So when you travel down, the way I like to imagine it is if you're driving from Beersheba to Eilat, somewhere along that road, you are driving over land that the Jews had crossed through on their journey to Israel. So the camp, Moses and the Aaron and the Mishkan and everything, the Levites, they had passed through this zone to go around, remember, the bottom of Israel, because they went through the south. They had crossed underneath Israel and then up the eastern border around Edom and around Moab to be able to enter Israel through the Jordan Valley. Mm-hmm. What's today the Jordan Valley, Midbar HaArava, the Arava desert.
It would be
so. It's just fascinating.
The Bik'ah. Yeah.
It's called the Bik'ah.
It's called Bikat HaYarden.
Bikat HaYarden. Midbar HaArava is where? South?
Arava is between Beersheba, or actually between Dimona and Eilat.
Oh, so it is. It might even be part of Israel that's not biblically part of Israel.
Yeah, 100%.
So what's interesting, what I will say, for two things. First of all, is that that's the south side of Israel. The western border of Israel, we know where the western border of Israel is, the Mediterranean. It's really easy, actually. Mm-hmm. North and east is interesting because we have the Jordan rivers being part of the eastern border, but as you move north and as you move northeast, it gives us locations which I can read off to you if it makes you feel happy. But it's not 100% clear. I should read off to you? Okay.
Please do. I'm pulling up the Google Maps.
Here we are. So he says your western border is the Mediterranean Sea, and it's not so complicated. Oh, and there's islands and the edge of the Mediterranean Sea, which today I don't think exists, but there's a little bit of water as well that belongs to Israel, and it's important to think about. But then the northern border goes towards Hor Hahar. Mm-hmm. Then you go to the root of Hamas. You end up in Tzdad, Tifron, Chatzar Einan is the end of it. And then you turn south from Chatzar Einan to Shefam, from Shefam to Rivla, from Rivla to Ayin, and it goes down and it hits the eastern shore of Kinneret. And then it uses the Jordan River all the way down to the Salt Sea.
But
So essentially, Israel.
that's
We have
not
Israel right now
including-
is shaped like this, like.
Yeah, but it's not including Harei Gilad, which are today not considered part of Israel in modern times. They're not.
So this is the point. The Harei Gilad was the part it actually mentions at the end of that. It says, "This is the land that was given to the 9.5 tribes, because don't forget, Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh already received their inheritance. The other pieces on the other side of land, which we captured extra, which is the eastern part of the eastern part of the Jordan River, North Jordan, and massive chunk of Syria."
Okay.
So the question that we would that needs to be clarified, and when I say needs to be clarified, means I don't think anyone actually knows. People have a lot of opinions. There's different sages, and they have different maps. If you go to every Bible worth its salt, tries to make a map with pictures to show you where all these pieces are, and it ranges. Like it can reach all the way up to Turkey. Not that Lebanon is so big, but like. You can, the most expansive version of this map reaches all the way to Turkey and eats a massive chunk of Syria, which is interesting because, that's the shape of Israel in our minds today is the modern map. And the modern map has a massive piece of Israel which doesn't belong to the biblical Israel, and it's missing maybe a third, maybe 2/3. There's a range, right? It could be 2/3 of Israel is actually not in Israel.
My take on it is that Israel, throughout the Bible, we see leaders and direction from Hashem at very strategically utilizing topography. There's the famous dialogue between David HaMelech and Hashem. I don't know if it's through a Navi or directly, where David is asking, like, how do I know which mountain to put it on? How do I know which mountain to tell my son to put it on? And Hashem tells him that it needs to be between shoulders, meaning our neck is our vital possession. It connects this to this, and it allows all the information to be transferred, and therefore our shoulders are higher than our neck, our chin is lower than all of these things are made to protect it. And if you look at Jerusalem topographically, it's actually sunken deeper than its surrounding mountains. I imagine if there's a similar,
it's a mountain inside of mountains.
Yeah, and it's actually lower, physically. There are very few peak points outside of Jerusalem that you can look directly into Temple Mount, one of them being Kastel, which is to the northwest, if I'm not mistaken, and you have Herodium, which we spoke about. But other than that, you can't even see Har HaBayit from outside of Jerusalem.
Right.
That if that is the theme in which we were talking about our borders, I imagine that we're talking about the Litani being the northern border. Because what better a natural border than a very, very deep, very, very steep river that runs most of the year, if not all of the year at that time. The Jordan River makes perfect sense because, again, it's a river. It's a clear line in the sand, basically.
Right. It's less arbitrary.
Yeah. And I imagine that's also...
I'll take that.
Yeah, and I also imagine that's why a lot was not included because, until the trees stop growing. And there's a point when you pass where there are no more trees. And that's depending on where you are. Nowadays, the trees stop growing a lot before you get to Beersheba, even though Israel is irrigating and growing its non-desert territories. But I imagine that back in that time, there was about an area where either there was a big drop just south of Dimona, beginning of the Arava Desert, or it was where the trees stop.
Right. Huh.
There is a theory that during Solomon's rule, he did acquire a lot.
It's very possible. In fact, by the way, if interestingly enough, there's actually 2 layers of Jewish conquest. There was a conquest once we went into Israel. It's called Olei Mitzrayim, those who went in from Mitzrayim. There's a second layer of those who are Olei Bavel, those who came back when Ezra brought the people back from Bavel. When we took over Israel in the time of after entering Israel from Egypt, it was a temporary spiritual possession. Mm-hmm. And when we left, the spirituality evaporated. Basically, we entered it. I forgot the exact halachic terminology. essentially there's a way you can conquest through. Way you can take something and make it your possession, especially in nationalistic land conquest. You can take something through conquering it, or you can take it through like a communal chazaka, like a communal acquisition by usage. When we came up as, I believe this is the parsing of it, that when the Jews came up from the desert, from Egypt, they took it as a nation with a king, and they conquered it as like as a country. And when we came up afterwards with permission from Cyrus and permission from Daryavish and Ezra, we took it more as a chazaka. And when we took it the second time, we took it once, and now forever has spiritual, the spiritual power of Israel, which is why there are certain mitzvot that are bound specifically to the land that is applicable today, even though technically we don't. For many years, we didn't have a Jewish state or a religious state. And even today, we don't have a king. We don't have a lot of the different things you would need to have. Although it is interesting, by the way, because some of the mitzvot that are tied to the land of Israel, there's essentially, this is a good place to talk about. There's three types of mitzvot in relation to physical land or physical country. The borders of Israel are very important because you have to know where the stuff that grows on this side of the border is part of Israel and therefore has certain mitzvot, and stuff that borders on that side of the border is not part of Israel, therefore doesn't have mitzvot. Tithing, truma is not holy outside of Israel in the same way that the one inside of Israel. Challah inside of Israel is holier than outside of Israel. But, for example, challah is a great example. I'll explain what challah is in a moment, but challah is a great example. It's a mitzvah that only really applies when there is and I think we may have mentioned this earlier. I'm realizing now we may have mentioned it earlier. The challah is not the bread; it is the piece that you take off and give to the kohen. That was holy. It was holy that only the kohen could eat it, and you had to be pure to eat it. So that piece that we call challah that mitzvah only applies when the entire country, when the entire Jewish people are living in the land of Israel.
So it doesn't apply it.
And if most what?
So it doesn't apply it.
So it applies today from a rabbinic perspective, which is why challah today, people just let it spoil, they let it burn, it doesn't have a holiness to it, and they don't give it to the kohen. It we're doing it now to keep ourselves in the vibe, because any day Mashiach can come, and any day we can take Israel back, and then suddenly we're going to need to do the challah for real. So we do it now as a spiritual echo of what the real mitzvah is. But what the point of it is. So again, so let's clarify for a second. 3 levels of mitzvot. Mitzvot that apply everywhere, anywhere, no matter what. There's mitzvot that apply in the land of Israel, no matter what the scenario and situation is. And then you have the mitzvot that apply in Israel that are based on whether or not the entire society is in Israel. Whether the entire country is in Israel.
So examples
or the entire community is in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question essentially is, at what point do we make a census? Because we're reaching that point now. We're getting close. At what point do we begin to say, actually the entire nation of Israel is in Israel now? Or the Rov, the majority is in Israel. If the majority is in Israel, do we have to start keeping Shemitah again? Do we start counting 777 and resting on the 7th year? Nowadays we do it. We have a cycle, but it is mostly rabbinic, I believe, or at least parts of it are rabbinic. I'm not sure 100%, but I do, for example, Shmitat Ksafim, which is that the money reverts back to the owners. The loans get canceled every 7 years, all types of loans, financial loans. Mm-hmm. That only happens when we have the Jubilee, the Yovel. And the Jubilee only happens when we have all the Jews in Israel. So there's things in today's society. For example, would we have to have a Jubilee? Which at some point we're going to have to look around and say to each other, hey, look, all the Jews live, most of the Jews live in Israel. Well, again, what's the most? Majority, quality, and quantity. Israel's going to be like, it's today. And we're like, no, I don't know. How do you calculate Jewish communities that have been lost, right? How do you calculate let's say, for example, American Jewry, right? What's the census? There is no real good census of American Jews. And the biggest challenge is that a lot of American Jews have assimilated, right? How many generations do you continue calculating those Jews as being part of the Jewish people, especially in the fact that Chabad and other inspirational endeavors are working incredibly hard to make sure that even Jewish people, it's not even the right word to say even, we're working very hard to make sure that Jewish people whose grandparents have assimilated today are super involved Jewishly, whether they're religious, whether they're involved. Those people for sure count as being part of the Jewish people. So when do you officially say, okay, now we can write off this right after the bad word, but I'm saying in the sense of like the way that in business you say, okay, that's a loss, they're out. When do we start to say, okay, this, because then, again, how many generations, how many people, how do we factor for that? Do we say that American Jewry, 30% assimilated, now they're gone? Do we say 30% are assimilated, they're in the shadows, they're going to come back? Is it 50%? Is it 80%? Is it 60%? What's the number? How do you figure that out? So it's a very complicated question, but this is an important question to ask, because if we do determine that most Jews are in Israel, we then suddenly have a halachic shifting in the way that we do a lot of, or a bunch of the 613.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. Which is also why the Torah goes very specific and where the border. It doesn't just say wherever you can conquer, that's Israel. There's land that is holy and there's land that is not. This is the land that is promised to you, but it's also the holy land, and the part that's not is not holy, and it has different laws.
Okay.
Which I think is cool. Okay. Good. Now the next thing that the Torah does is it continues on in this thing. So first of all, it appoints people to be part of the leadership that are going to be the people who take the lottery, who are representing the Jewish people in the lottery for the inheritance lot. What?
The Nasim.
The Nasim. But it's a new round of Nasim. Mm-hmm. For example, the one leading off the tribe of Yehuda is Kalev ben Yefuneh, which was the second spy along with Joshua. So Kalev is now the head of, and a lot of the names that we have are, it's a new round of names, a new round of people. I have never done this, and I kind of want to, is basically create a table. Every time that we have the representatives of the tribes, put them in a list. So you can see all the different varieties of names. Okay, and a lot of the names are gone. Like, we don't do them anymore. When was the last time you met somebody whose name was... So here's a name that you know. Shlomi. Common name today.
Yeah.
Then you have... Kemuel. Where is that?
No, not one I've heard.
Kemuel. Chaniel. Buki, not as a nickname, but as a full name.
Buki?
Yogli. Not as a... Buki. Buki's a nickname.
It's a nickname.
I don't think it's a name.
Yeah.
How about Yogli?
Yogli, only in the Youngle book.
Yogli sounds like a bad name. Not a bad name, but like making fun of somebody. What a Yogli you are. So anyway, these are names that are gone today. But it's interesting. I kind of want to make this thing and match it up. Who's who? And there are traditions in the commentary in the oral traditions that actually have certain people as the same people. It's the same person, just a different name. And why do they have that? But that's to be left. Not over here. This list is a fresh list, a new set of people. And then we have the cities of the Levim. There are 48 cities that the Levites are given in Israel, and they're given open space. They're given a place to live. They're given space around the city to be for the migrash, for their cattle, and they have open space that is like beauty, garden beauty. 2,000 cubits. Open space, which means they would cut down a lot of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because, in modern society, where it's almost like a lot of the things that what used to be a sign of openness and wealth today is like you're too lazy, like sun tanning, right? It used to be that people who had a tan, they were too poor to sit inside, and they were forced to work in the fields, and that's why they're tanned. And so it was the whiter and more pristine the skin of a person, the more like, oh, this guy is so well off, he can sit indoors months at a time, right?
All day. Yeah.
And then today it has reversed. A person that's tan, they're like, oh, they care about themselves, they're very healthy, and they have time to sit in suntan.
Yeah.
And you have suntan cream, and you have suntan lotions, and all that kind of good stuff, which is fake stuff. But it's funny how that has reversed, essentially.
Yeah.
Based on society. So with the Levim, the beauty of the city was you have wide open space. And you see it, by the way, even today, like massive, the beautiful Americana parks and projects, having a big expanse that's clear of trees is like a luxury.
Yeah.
It speaks to luxury. Not a golf course. Just, some people would say it's a golf. It's not a golf course. It was just open space.
Maybe the Levites
And,
were playing golf.
When they were not, it was very stressful to be in the temple. So when they were off, they were home playing golf, probably.
Probably.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's interesting is that these cities that were for the Levium did two roles. Number one is that they were for the Levium to live in, obviously. They were also a city of refuge. And it explicitly speaks here about six cities of refuge. It's a city of shelter is really probably the right terminology. It's a city of shelter. All of the cities of the Levium were cities of shelter. There were 6 specific ones, 3 inside Israel, 3 on the Transjordan side, that had an extra layer of miklat power to it. But they all had the same ability that they protected someone. But what was the scenario? What was the scenario where someone would need refuge?
Alilot dam.
Yeah. Talk to me.
So Alilot dam is there are a lot of laws, if I'm not mistaken, that allow or don't forbid the taking of revenge explicitly. So therefore, if someone caused you harm, it would make sense that someone would harm them back. If someone were to, kill a loved one of yours, you might kill a loved one.
Kill.
One of theirs.
That's the key. That's the key. That's the key.
So kill a loved one of yours, then you might want to kill a loved one of theirs back, you kill
the guy. You want to kill the guy.
And they can run off to a Ir Miklat and seek refuge there, and they have to stay inside the Ir Miklat. The second they leave, their protection is over.
Correct. And there are certain things that the Ir Miklat of the 6 cities have a little more protection rather than the regular cities of the Levium. But they had the same power. They protected the person. One example of that was if you didn't know that you were in Ir Miklat, it still protected you. While if you were in the city of Levi, if you didn't know, then it didn't protect you. If you were sleeping and you entered, if you're on a wagon and you were sleeping and the wagon goes in, you're protected even though you're not awake. But if you're in the city of the Levium, you had to know that you were in the city. For example. But what's interesting is the idea. 2 ideas. Number one is the Ir Miklat was there to protect a person who had inadvertently killed somebody else. Because remember, in Judaism, there is a strong judicial system, which also includes someone who kills somebody gets put to death. Then we have a death penalty. So it's for someone who had mistakenly killed someone, but it wasn't a complete and total accident. If it was a total accident, then the person who had done the killing, or who had caused the accident, it's not his fault or her fault. It's just a mistake. It happens. Mm-hmm. Specifically in cases where there's a level of irresponsibility on the part of the person who had caused the death that then accidentally kills somebody, that person has to run away and for them to be protected from the Goel Hadam, which is a very interesting law, that there is an idea of someone who is anyone from the family of the person who was killed has the permission to kill the murderer or the accidental murderer. Mm-hmm. The way that it would work practically is that someone would die. The person who would cause the death of that person would immediately be escorted, or they would run, or they would be escorted to the nearest city of refuge. Then they would be taken to the court. And at the court, there would be a determination through a proper court case as to whether or not this person did it on purpose and therefore gets put to death, or it was a total mistake and therefore they did walk free, or it was a mistake that they are responsible for and therefore the Goel Adam has permission. They're returned back to the city of refuge, or it wasn't just a mistake, but it was a deeply irresponsible mistake where even the city of refuge won't accept you. And you have no protection at all.
Like
and
they would
determine
on top
that
of a house and just throwing rocks off the top, not looking to see if anyone's passing by. Pretty stupid mistake.
Yeah, shooting arrows in a public space.
Yeah.
Shooting arrows down Main Street, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
So and it goes through the Chumash itself. This is an example of where the story moves. The Chumash moves away from stories and moves into conversation of law. If it was he kills someone with an iron instrument, which is I think to me it's not just it's as any size of iron instrument it causes death. A stone, a brick, a block of wood, those things have to be measured, and you have to figure out how heavy and how far and how strong. What if it was a club, if it was a rock thrown, you have to figure out what causes the death of this person, because it also could be that someone is injured by this rock that was thrown at them, but then they died because they had, I don't know, lung cancer.
Yeah.
Right? So there has to be determination, and we don't do autopsies, but also has to be determination of like what what caused the death. What if they got sick and the sickness caused them to die? So it's not a direct death. So if the person who caused the death isn't directly responsible, they're more indirectly responsible, which is a different type of experience. It says that with metal, any drop of metal, which to me, whenever I read this, I think bullets. Any drop of metal, any size of metal, is causes death. So if someone killed somebody else with any form or shape or type of metal, then they're responsible for their person's death. But it speaks about the stone, how big it was, and if it finds if it was done out of hatred, or if it was done not out of hatred, if it was an accident, if it was on purpose. It talks about all this, and then it speaks about the court system, how you have to have a minimum of 23 people that are in the court, 10 that are going to try to find, or a minimum of 10 that are going to try to find a way to get this person free, a minimum of 10 that, or some of the 10 that are going to try to prosecute. It's not that the judges themselves are prosecuting, but the idea is that the way the verse says it, the congregation should judge, and the congregation should protect the murderer. We're talking about an accidental murderer. So the way that we read this is, the court is not supposed to be a sanigor v'kategor. They're supposed to be impartial. Mm-hmm. But we use this reading to say there's one community amongst the judges, a full minyan, that are going to be judgy. Mm-hmm. There's going to be another full minyan that is trying to save this guy, and you still have to have a majority. So the minimal amount of a court that can deal with a death penalty is 23 people.
Okay.
Which is a lot of people if you think.
Yeah, it's a lot
judges
more.
It's quite
very interesting.
Yeah. And then you have this idea of the person sitting in the Ir Miklat in the city that protects them, until the Kohen Gadol passes away. That rectifies this person's sin, and they're able to go back to their family. It could take 2 years. It could take 15 years. It could take 20 years. And it was this almost it was a flux state. What's interesting is that about this is that we would take the person who is pushed into exile. They would have to move there all of his industry. And if you had a teacher, a yeshiva student, he would move his yeshiva there. And if he was a teacher, his students would follow him. So the Pirkei Avot says, be careful who you teach, because what if the person you teach is irresponsible? And then they end up killing somebody by accident. Now you're going to have to move your whole yeshiva to the Ir Miklat. Ugh, terrible. Ooh. But one of the examples of society, of Jewish society, and thinking of society, which we spoke about last episode, is the idea of, in the Ir Miklat, you're not allowed to sell weapons. You're not allowed to sell traps. You're not allowed to sell. The idea is to make it hard where we suspect that the avenger, the blood avenger, is going to want to come into the Ir Miklat secretly and kill the person he's avenging blood, even though it's forbidden. Mm-hmm. So we say, if this person comes into the city with weapons, then everyone sees the weapons and everyone knows, who you're here to kill. What's going on? Who is it you want to kill? No, you can't kill that person. We're going to protect them. Or we're going to send you out. We'll ship you out. But if you come in randomly, I'm passing through, and then you buy a gun on the side. So there are people who use this kind of thing to talk about, first of all, the idea of a society. Again, back to the question of how much do you structure, manipulate society to be able to create protections for people? And we're talking here about accidental murder protections, but it's a certain things you're not, the place that you're supposed to be, the Ir Miklat's not supposed to be, it's not supposed to be more than 50% are people who accidentally killed. No more than 50% accidental murderers are living in the city. So if you have a situation where there's more than it starts filling up for whatever reason, let's say the high priest lives for many, many years, let's say it's a bad season, everyone's slip and fall accidents, but it's not slip and fall, it's like real accidents where people are being sent to the Ir Miklat. They have to do a campaign to bring people, move other people into the city to keep the balance of regulars versus the accidental murder populations. There's a lot of this conversation of you see the pieces that make a society into society, and how you have to. And people also use this conversation about gun control. Right? Judaism doesn't explicitly say thou shalt or thou shalt not have guns or weapons. There are times where we talk about how there's the fact that Jews didn't have their own weapons is a terrible thing and a sign of our lack of political and communal power. For example, the time of the Shoftim, certain times of that. But we also have this idea that we're not going to sell weapons in the Ir Miklat because we don't want you to kill people. So people use this as one of the many examples, or one of the
it does coincide with things we've spoken about earlier. I think it was last episode, maybe the one beforehand, about regulation and communism working at a small scale and not very much working in the big scale. You have all these cities and nachalot where you're not restricting. But you have 40 something Arei Miklat that are, and also I do think that it's I think that this is a really cool peek inside of Judaism's idea of cleansing the soul, even when it is sick. If someone has killed someone, whether it was by bad mistake or by okay mistake, it's like, all right, we're gonna invest in your soul. You're gonna be next to the holy people now, and you're gonna learn from them, and you're gonna. And we're going to keep you around people. Like, there has to be a ma'azan of at least 50%. We're going to keep you around people who have somehow kept it together up until now, plus the holy people. And there are no weapons in this area because, things have happened in your past, and we're going to keep you only around sacred things. And that's it's a much smaller scale, but much larger regulation. I think that's really pretty.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
It's like the teacher who sees the kid in the back, who's acting out and he's playing on his phone or he's talking in class, and rather than kicking him out of class, which we also said the Rebbe was not too thrilled about, it's hey, come sit next to me. I want you over here, and it's not like here front of the class. It's like, come sit next to me, and then after class, asking him, is everything okay at home? You doing okay? I feel like that's the message I'm getting from this story.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's amazing. And it's beautiful because, we're not going to, we'll save it for a different episode, but the Judaism is anti-prison.
Anti-prison. Yeah, I don't think we've ever heard of we've heard of dungeons in kingdoms, but not in
Yiddishkeit. No. So the counter argument for Judaism being anti-prison is, well, we have this. The Ir Miklat is not anti-prison, so we'll have to talk about how it fits in. But the Rebbe used that argument as a great way to talk about helping prisoners in prison. He spoke about this theme specifically just as he started a campaign to help prisoners in prison, an organization called Aleph, to help prisoners in prison. So he explained philosophically why, in addition to the fact that they're Jews, we have to help them because they're our brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. But in general, prison is actually a non-Jewish concept. It's not a Jewish concept. Therefore, there's a way that we look at them as being also suffering under a non-Jewish form of punishment. There's a lot to be spoken about here, which we're not going to do in this moment, but just conversation of what if they're dangerous to society and how does that what is the Jewish form of punishment that is good, and et cetera, et cetera. We can talk about that, but not now because I don't want to get distracted.
Yeah. Well, I think that like something that's also clear from what you've been mentioning about the Arei Miklat is like either this person is a menace to society and shouldn't be in society, meaning he shouldn't be, period, or he can be rehabilitated and his soul is worth saving, and therefore he's going to be around people that are mostly not like in his situation, which is not a prison, if you ask me. Like if you were to tell me that like, all right, we're gonna start a new concept for prisons, but half of the people in there or more have to be innocent. Find me the volunteers.
Right.
You know.
Right. Oh, interesting. Well, we can do nursing home prison. You know they have like preschool nursing homes.
Yeah.
Why don't we do prison nursing homes?
Yeah.
The government takes care of these people, and they live in the same. And when the dude comes out, he's like, "Oh, I just got put in here." It's like, "Oh, sonny boy, come sit down. I'll tell you my life story."
I like it. It is a cool.
Sounds
concept.
insane. That's the whole point.
It is a cool concept, but like I do think it's interesting, like that you pointed out that prisons is not a Jewish concept, and when you think about it, like prisons is kind of wild. It's like your punishment is that you get to live in a cage. I think that you know, like if you are worth saving,
We'll talk about it.
All right.
Yeah, you know, you're right. This is the argument you're making is the correct argument, and that's part of it. But in its lane, we'll deal with it. Okay, the last piece I think that we should be that the Parsha speaks about, the Torah Portion speaks about, is a strange. I thought it was in Pinchas, which is why we mentioned in the Pinchas episode, but it's actually spoken explicitly over here, where that the people, the children, the daughters of Tzlafchad, the children of Gilad and Mechir, of the son of Menashe, which were mentioned in the last Torah portion at the end as being part of the conquerors of the Transjordan area, they were commanded that they should marry only people within their own tribe.
Okay.
And the reason why is that way we should be able to have an organized splitting up of the land. It was a thing that lasted only for the generation of the spies. Not generation of spies, the generation going into the land of Israel. It was a one generation thing. It was just keep them in the family for now. So they ended up marrying. Keep it in the family, and they ended up marrying within the cousins. And it literally says, and they livnot dodehen lenashim. They were married their cousins. They married their uncles' children, and then everything worked out and stayed inside the inheritance. And these are the commands that God told Moshe in the desert of Moab, next to the Jordan River, across from Jericho. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazak.
Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazak. To those of you at home who stuck with us, you are a fifth of the way through the entire Chumash. This is a big milestone. We look forward to the next one. And I want to say I'm very, very grateful that I'm on this journey with you. This is very, very special.
I'm enjoying every moment. I appreciate the journey. I appreciate being on the journey. The 42 stops we've made in the last 10 Torah portions has been incredible. We're continuing to more exciting and more enthusiastic Torah discussion. And I think that we can say it now at the end of this thing. We're going to start bringing on guests. We're not sure when. We're going to start bringing on guests to have conversation with us, both to argue back, both people who have expertise, but just mainly community members, to add flavor and add spice to the conversation, because then it's going to be wild and spectacular.
Yes, sir. Parashat Mas'ei,
my friends,
Sefer Bamidbar, Chazak v'nitchazek.
Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazak. Well done.